It appears that I have to once again clarify my own personal views on religion. And this is because not only my last video, but some of the videos I made before that were a little outdated, and I feel that I think I could do a better job in trying to summarize what I am and what I believe. First and foremost, I do not currently accept the notion that a god or god exists. And why I don't believe that any god or god exists is because I have yet to see any evidence to suggest that they do. And to otherwise pretend that they do, I think is fairly dishonest. I also think it's fairly dishonest when a theist says that, well, it might be true, therefore you should just do it anyways. Maybe as a possible notion for accepting eternal reward, or avoiding eternal punishment, or even something like, well, it's just generally good to believe in something rather than nothing, right? Or the variation of that being, well, it's good to believe in a god because it makes me feel warm, happy, and accepted. I think that these are all fairly dishonest reasons for any theist to use to justify their beliefs, or conversely for any atheist to justify their lack of belief. I guess that I am of the mindset that you should just believe what you naturally believe because you think it's true, and not because you think it's useful. And it's at this point in the video where I can predict some of my detractors will be like, oh, you just don't believe because you don't want to believe. Some of that free will bullshit, which I've already addressed earlier, but let's just put it this way. I don't want to believe in your God. I don't not want to believe in your God. I am completely neutral as to whether or not I want to accept your God's existence, because quite frankly, I want to remain objective when it comes to this. I want to remain completely objective in judging whether or not a God or God exists. And if I want a god to exist, then that's just confirmation bias right there. So yeah, I don't think that this system that the three major religions use to try and confirm their god's existence is in any way practical, because it relies on a person's faith, which is essentially them shutting their mind off to physical evidence or even reality if it conflicts with their faith, with their beliefs. And it essentially relies on confirmation bias to fuel their own beliefs. And I don't think that's very practical, and I definitely don't think that's very honest. Now, I can already hear my detractors saying, oh, of course he's going to say that, he's an atheist. Well, slow down. And while we're slowing down, I have an honest question to ask any theist in my audience. Wouldn't your God generally be more happy or more proud of us, human beings, if we sought truth with an open heart, rather than just accept the claims of theists at face value? Wouldn't your God rather us be cautious and prudent and examine things objectively, even if it might lead us down the completely fucking wrong path? Wouldn't your God rather us go through this honest method of inquiry than to go through this very obviously flawed and biased method that theists use to confirm their God's existence, which essentially relies on confirmation bias and circular logic? So, if God exists, what then? Beyond a reasonable doubt, I am shown that a God exists. I'm just going to use the Abrahamic God as the example, because it's the only one that I know. Yes, I will accept your God's existence. It would be completely stupid of me not to. If it was proven to me beyond a reasonable doubt, that's nothing short of insanity if I didn't. But would I worship this God? Well, no. But then again, what kind of answer would you expect out of me if I were to be asked the same thing of any mortal being who committed the same level of atrocities that the God of the Bible, the God of the Quran, and the God of the Torah had committed? You wouldn't expect anything less of me, would you? And it's at this point in the conversation where theists can go one of two routes, and I think that both are fairly dishonest, in my opinion. Every single conversation I've had with theists at this point generally ends up in one of those two ways. And the first is probably the most common. and that is that theists will attempt to shift the conversation. Why don't you talk about some of the good things in the Bible, or the Quran, or the Torah? Why do you always talk about all the bad things? Because I think that there's something in them, something they've been raised to think, that their God is all good, all loving, cares about humanity, and somehow they can't accept that this is the same God that condoned mass murder in the flood, that condoned murder on several other occasions, the same God that condoned infanticide and filicide. This is the same God that condoned stoning people to death, persecution of minority groups. And yeah, I don't think that theists can really accept that that God is one and the same with the God that they believe in and worship. The second path is, I think, equally as dishonest, if not more. But apart from just being solely dishonest, it's also relatively morally reprehensible. It's disgusting in that aspect. And the answer usually goes along the lines of, well, you're just an ignorant human being, just like all of us. We shouldn't question the will of an almighty God. Or, alternatively, well, he created us. He can do whatever he wants with us. He's the creator, we're his creation. We shouldn't question it. And again, I have to ask, to any theist in my audience, if this is the path you're willing to go down, if this is how you want to play this game, then I have to ask, what can't you justify with that sort of mentality? And furthermore, what can't you justify, and why can't that same justification be used with any evil dictator in history? Let's face it, this isn't free will, this is a dictatorship. So the interesting thing is, I think, that believing that this God exists and accepting this God's existence and worshipping this God are two completely separate things for me. And they're not exactly bound by the exact same laws. I view God's existence through the lens of a scientist or an empiricist, where I can determine whether or not this God exists as objectively as humanly possible through the scientific method, which has the largest proven track record of success that I know. Then again, worshipping this God is different. That calls for the humanist in me, which not only relies on empirical fact, but also, I guess, a sense of emotional output. See, empiricism only gets you so far in questions of morality. I think that with things like this, it's not a matter of who's right or who's wrong, or what's true or not true. With these questions, like bordering on morality, I think that the only thing that I can really do is put forth my opinion and justify it as best I can. And I think I've done so, and I think I have justified my opinion to a reasonable extent as to why I would not worship this God if this God actually existed. So, once again, that's setting the record straight on my personal views. Thanks for watching. May the truth always be heard.